All right, so here's our lesson on invasive species. As you can see, sometimes a species can grow a little too well, but what are invasive species? These are species that can live and thrive outside of their normal habitat. They can be carried from one location to another, and while they can occasionally be beneficial, like if you think about it, we have a lot of species that we take around, like we'll take cattle with us, we take chickens with us, a lot of these domesticated species, but species are considered invasive when they threaten native species. Native species are those that are indigenous to an area, meaning they evolved in that area or they were naturally distributed there, like they migrated or something like that. This is different from exotic or introduced species, which are living outside their native range, and these are the species that can become invasive species. So, invasive species tend to have a few characteristics in common. They are generalists, meaning that they can survive under a variety of conditions. Sometimes they're able to have a variety of food sources, and so they're able to adapt very easily to new conditions. There often are selected species, and both of those will allow them to grow their population very rapidly. You'll usually not find something like a case selected species like elephants becoming invasive, just because they would take a long time for their population to grow. But any R selected species would be able to, from a very few specimens, be able to grow very rapidly into a large population, which then allows them to outcompete native species for resources, especially because they don't have natural controls. So they usually don't have natural predators. They don't have naturally occurring diseases in that area. And so there are less limiting factors on their population. But they're able to adapt to a variety of conditions, which means they're able to have very large amounts of food resources, which allows their population to grow quite rapidly. So, how do you control invasive species? Well, it's very difficult once they are established in an area. You have a couple of things you can do. Most of them are going to be very familiar from our lessons on pest management, especially integrated pest management, because a lot of those pest control methods can be used. Biological controls, so see if you can find a natural predator or virus or infectious agent. Chemical controls, that would be things like pesticides. Manual controls, physically removing them from the environment. Cultural controls, and then mechanical controls, like establishing barriers. The best thing to do is to detect invasive species early and respond rapidly. So that's called early detection, rapid response. Unfortunately, once they're established in an area, it's very difficult to get rid of them. So, a lot of countries and areas have focused on preventing species from getting established in the first place. So, don't let them get a foothold. And a big way of that is inspecting things when they enter the country, making sure that you don't have any extra little bugs or other species kind of infesting an area or infesting some goods that you're trying to bring in. If you travel to other countries, they won't let you bring in food from outside countries, especially not plant matter, because a lot of invasive species have been accidentally introduced that way. So we're kind of trying to learn from our lessons. Countries and areas that are especially vulnerable to invasive species like Australia or Hawaii are very careful with what they allow into and out of the area. So let's go over some examples of invasive species just so you can kind of get an idea. So kudzu is a native to East Asia and Southeast Asia and some Pacific islands. You see here a picture of kudzu. It was introduced to especially the United States in the late 1800s. People brought it over because it looked pretty. So they grew it as an ornamental plant. And then once there were these large areas of bare dirt during the Dust Bowl, and people were trying to conserve soil, it was very heavily encouraged to be planted. Like the government paid people to plant this. To help control erosion on steep slopes, it was planted. The problem is that it grows very rapidly, and what it does is it outcompetes native species for resources, root space, and especially light because it can grow on top of other species. So, what you see in this picture right here is you see there are trees that are actually covered with kudzu. And so, once the trees are covered by kudzu, they're no longer able to photosynthesize and then they can die. So, what are some of the control measures? Well, people have gone out and physically pulled up kudzu, pulled up the roots, or cut down the vines as they're growing. There's targeted herbicide use, so kind of applying it directly to the plant instead of widespread spraying. And then there's also a few infectious fungus species that infect kudzu that people are experimenting with using those as a biological control. I can't say that kudzu removal has been um, super effective because it's still an invasive species in a lot of areas. It's found in 32 out of 50 states in the United States. It is found in Italy, Fiji, Australia, and you're going to see Australia on here as an invaded range quite a bit because we've introduced a lot of things there. So, Asian carp, this is actually a couple of different carp species that are native to East Asia. They were introduced in some cases on purpose to help clean commercial fish ponds. And the areas they've invaded are especially here in the United States, the Mississippi River Basin. And there's some evidence that they have been spreading to the Great Lakes, but their population isn't quite as high as what you see in this picture. This is silver carp, one of the species that are included in that Asian carp family, and one of their big problems is that they jump out of the water, especially when they're startled. So this is a boat going on a river somewhere in the Mississippi River system, and it's just driving on by, and it's scaring all these carp out of the water, and they jump really high up so they can actually hit people and hurt them. But the big thing is they outcompete native species for food. So where these Asian carp have spread, a lot of the native species of fish have experienced a decline in population. So what are we doing? Well, there have been various methods tried. Physical barriers don't really work. One experiment tried very loud noises, some electrical fencing and bubbles. And then in more recent times, the government in the area has been releasing ads trying to encourage people to fish for these carp and use them as a food source. So that hopefully, hunting them and eating them would make their population go down. Zebra mussels are a mussel, which is a clam-like species. They are these little guys here. They were native to lakes in southern Russia and Ukraine, and it seems that they probably were in ballast water, which is something that ships release from time to time. I'm not well versed in sailing, so I can't give you a more detailed explanation on that right now. If you're interested, go look it up. But from European ships in the 1980s, they have invaded parts of Europe, they have invaded North America, and what they do is they compete with native species for food, but they also just grow on everything. So they're a risk to more than just native ecosystems. They'll clog up pipes. They get taken in hydroelectric dams and will start clogging up with the machinery there because they grow on a lot of different surfaces. They even grow on other mussels, which could then prevent them from being able to get food effectively. Some of the methods that have been used to control them in Europe, birds are an effective predator, so they'll reduce the population of these guys quite a bit during feeding season. In North American lakes, sometimes fish predators can reduce the population. There are some chemical pesticides that have been experimented with, but it's not going well. The cane toad. This is a species that is native to South and Central America. And it was introduced to various places because it eats the larvae of these beetles that infest sugarcane. And so wherever sugarcane was being grown, they try to import these cane toads to control the pest population. So they've been introduced to islands in the Caribbean, but the places where they're particularly invasive are Australia, the Philippines, Fiji, Hawaii, and even Florida. But they're a huge problem in Australia because they release a toxin and if something tries to eat them, they basically get poisoned by these cane toads who reproduce very, very effectively. And so they outcompete native species. They poison anything that tries to eat them. I think their toxin can even blind humans if it hits you in the eye. And to make matters worse, in Australia, they didn't eat the species they were brought in to control. So they were brought in and caused huge problems, and it didn't even work. Some of the things that are being used to control them are bait traps that have chemicals and pheromones that will only attract cane toad tadpoles, so you can get rid of the babies before they metamorph into adult frogs. Or what they're trying to do is use bait traps that have the poison toad meat to train predators to not try to eat them. There are some local species that have adapted to their feeding techniques, so that way they don't get hit by the toxin, but it's kind of hit or miss. The prickly pear cactus, which a lot of you guys will probably be familiar with, it's nopal. If you eat that, there's also the tuna or the prickly pear fruit. Its original range, and these are a group of different cactus species that are closely related, is the Americas, North and South America. In some places, it was introduced in gardens. In Australia, it was used for agricultural fencing. So instead of, building a fence, you just grow a line of prickly pears and nothing will try and pass through it. And sometimes it was used as food for livestock, especially during droughts, since cactuses can survive droughts. It was especially prominent in Australia. I think it still has a presence in South Africa and Ethiopia. And its impact was that it displaced native species and it was harming local wildlife because they would try to eat it or get touched by the spines and then end up getting pricked and harmed that way. This was actually a fairly successful control effort by using a biological control, and that was done by introducing a moth whose larvae eat the cactus, and that was able to show some big successes, especially in Australia, with controlling the population of these cacti. Lionfish were originally from the Indo-Pacific Oceans. As you can see, they're very fancy looking. And so people brought them into the Americas as pets and had them in aquariums. We're not 100% sure what the actual releasing mechanism was, but it's possible, maybe probable, that people who had bought them as pets and didn't feel up to caring for them released them, and they ended up off the east coast of the United States and in the Caribbean, where they have become invasive. They overpopulate reef areas and they're aggressive towards native species, so they'll push them out of their native habitat. This can cause issues with the food chain because local species aren't adapted to eat the lionfish, and then the food chains in the area just kind of collapse. So some of the control measures, you may have seen videos on this. People hunt them. People have been licensed as divers to go and kill them. There are traps that have used. They use remotely operated vehicles. I think I saw an episode of something where somebody was trying to modify a gun to shoot underwater, so they could go shoot lionfish. There's all sorts of ways people are trying to get rid of these. And then another way is promoting lionfish as a food source. So if they could be caught and used as a food fish, then it, protects other species that you would like to have stay in the area and retain their populations, while also providing food for people. The Burmese python is originally from Southeast Asia, and it was imported as a pet. So a lot of people had these as pets, and then there were some breeding facilities where they were raising these so they could sell them as pets. And during a particularly bad hurricane in the early 90s, some of these breeding facilities were ruined and the pythons escaped. Some people also just released them. I think there are public relations campaigns in Florida to tell people not to release their Burmese pythons into the wild. So the range that they are invasive in right now is southern Florida, especially the Everglades, which is a dense kind of, not quite jungle, but it's like a swamp area. And it's very easy for the Burmese pythons to hide there. The problem is they eat native species. So there are a lot of areas where rabbits, raccoons, and other species that they can prey on end up decreasing dramatically in population once the pythons are spotted there. They also outcompete native predator species, so they'll compete with native snakes and even gators. Some of these have even been seen to try and prey on alligators as well. So they'll eat a lot of different things, which wreaks havoc on local food webs. The control measures to remove them, what I mostly saw when I was looking for this is there's some competitions to encourage people to get rid of the pythons, and they're supposed to be humanely killed once they are caught. And this is an annual competition. There's also something called Python Patrol, where people can get trained to identify and monitor and then report where they see pythons in the wild. So that way, people who are trained can come out and capture them. But as far as I know, I don't think these have made a significant dent in the python population. And then something you may be intimately familiar with, the fire ant. So the red imported fire ant originally came from South America, and it was accidentally introduced because it was on some ships that were docking in what we think Mobile, Alabama in the 1930s, and from there they have spread across the southern United States. They've also spread to other areas, likely accidentally because nobody introduces fire ants on purpose, to Australia, New Zealand, some countries in Asia, and the Caribbean and Europe. These guys are pretty aggressive and they will displace and outcompete native ant species. They also will aggressively, as you could probably tell if you've ever stood on a fire ant mound or been near a fire ant mound, they will aggressively bite animals. And they will swarm and aggressively bite animals. And so that can be really harmful to species. And the control measures, it's really hard to do like a blanket spraying. And I don't know that there's been a lot of research into biological controls of them just because it might be hard to not affect native ant species as well. So, as far as I could see, what most often happens is pesticide control, especially on individual yards. I myself have used it in my yard because I don't want to get the living daylights bitten out of me by fire ants because I've had that happen. And so that's kind of it, but they are continuing to spread, has not been a success story. So, as you can see from this end slide, it is no bueno to have these invasive species around.